If you're anything like me, you want to have some wireless cameras for your church livestream, but maybe you haven't found the best transmitter-receiver combo at a price that you actually like, or maybe you haven't even researched it at all yet. Well, Accsoon sent me their CineView Master 4K wireless transmission system to try out, and I've been playing with it for a couple of weeks now. Now, I've tried out a lot of different budget systems, and honestly, most of them have fallen short in one way or another. Well, usually in more than one way, actually. At $850, the CineView is definitely still budget, but I feel like it's on the upper end of budget, since a lot of other cheap ones fall more like $500. Now, does this mean that this will check a lot more boxes than those systems will? That's a good question, and that's what I'm here to answer. Before I dive too deep into it though, wireless video is useful in all sorts of different shooting scenarios. For example, you can use it when you're filming yourself, for setting up a portable monitor for a client so they can see what you're filming, or even just when you need to put a camera in a weird spot that you aren't able to directly monitor it on the camera. And then there's the reason that I care the most about. It's as a way to include a wireless camera in a live production setting. And because that's what I care about, and it's what this channel, Budget Church Live Streaming, is focused on, those are the parameters that I'm going to be reviewing this system under. There are a lot of features that the system has that simply don't apply to this shooting situation, even if they might be great features overall. So I'm not gonna dig into each and every one in really insane detail, but at least now you know why. Also, full disclosure, Accsoon sent me this unit, but they don't have any say in this video, they won't see it before you, and anything I say is 100% my own opinion and experiences. So without further ado, let's dig into these units and the features. So first of all, the big selling point of the system is that they can transmit at up to 4K 60. And honestly, this is the first thing that we don't super care about at this point. Very few churches are live streaming at 4K 60. And honestly, if they are, they probably aren't spending only $850 on a wireless system. Most of us are in 1080p, so while 4K is great, it's not really a selling point to me. Next up, they're claiming under 25 milliseconds of latency. Now in live production, low latency is super important since you need to sync up multiple cameras and also sync your audio source with that. They also claim that this sub 25 is best in class, and more on this one later. So next up is their tri-band connectivity and transmission. And this is pretty cool. Basically, the system works on 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz bands all at the same time, prioritizing whichever one has the best signal at a given time. So this means if any of them actually drops out for whatever reason, you won't actually lose your wireless video unless all three are lost at the same time. This should lead to a very reliable connection, even in areas with really crowded wireless spectrums, such as your church auditorium, for example. They've also got some other things like a 2.5 kilometer line of sight range, like what? The ability to stream to multiple devices at a time, and the ability to stream straight to a phone or an iPad. And none of these really apply to my situation, but it's worth knowing. So the things I really care about are image quality, the connectivity, the ease of use, and the latency. So I did some testing of those exact things. In order to test, I ran my camera's output to a 3-way HDMI splitter. Output 1 was directly hardwired into our switcher, output 2 went to the Accsoon transmitter, and output 3 went to a secret other transmitter that's probably not that much of a secret, and some of you could probably get, okay, fine. It went to the Teradek Ace 500, the wireless transmitter that we currently use at my church. This way, we could compare the 3 different signals and see what we like or dislike about the Accsoon unit compared to the other 2 in a completely equal way. So first off, ease of use, and I have to say, the Accsoon did really well in this category. Everything just kind of works right out of the box. You plug in your source, you plug in your output, turn them on, and everything just works. Now each device also has these nice little rotary dials and LCD screens in order to view and adjust all of your different settings and connection details. Some of the naming in the menus isn't super intuitive to me and it's not super clear, but honestly, these aren't really settings that you're going to be adjusting all that often, so that's kind of whatever. Kind of related to ease of use, these things are kind of chonky. Like, they're not massive, but they're definitely not nothing. They do have some nice quarter 20 mounts, so it would be fairly easy to rig them up, but they've also got 6 pretty big antennas each, so just know that you're gonna have to make some room on your rig for this guy. That is, assuming that the image quality makes it worth adding to your setup. And honestly, this is where things kind of start getting complicated. The picture that you get out of these units depends pretty heavily on the settings that you're using in each one of them, specifically the bitrate settings that the unit gives you access to. So on the transmitter, you can choose a bitrate from 1 to 12. I'm not really sure what real world numbers those correspond to, but 1 is the worst and 12 is the best, and it comes out of the box set to 9, so if that gives you any indication. When it's set to 12, it's pretty comparable image to what I'm used to getting on the Ace 500. That is, I'm happy enough with it and would definitely use it. At 9, you can definitely notice a little bit of smearing and some loss of detail compared to the wired option, but nothing that I would be all that worried about in a fast-paced worship setting. I think it would get kind of lost. However, if you end up dropping it down to 1 out of 12, everything just kind of becomes a big blocky mess and completely unusable as an input to your live stream. Like, honestly, I'm struggling to know when you'd ever want to use something that looks like this, unless it just greatly improves latency and range and you were just using it for monitoring. And honestly, that's exactly what Accsoon claims it'll do, improve those features. But we'll talk about latency still in another minute. The next thing I care about in our live stream wireless systems is the connectivity. Specifically, I want them to stay connected and not drop out while we're using them. And well, honestly, yeah, these fit the bill. I didn't do a full range test going 2.5 kilometers, but I walked all around our building and throughout our auditorium, and I never lost signal on these, so honestly, that's good enough for me. It's not exactly an intense shooting scenario. I always recommend people put the receivers as close to their transmitters as they can anyway, since we're really using these for safety and convenience, not because we actually need to be far away from our receivers. I couldn't tell how well Accsoon's triple band auto switching feature worked or didn't work, but it did light up all the boxes saying they all had signal, so presumably it was helping, I guess? I don't know. Your mileage could vary. It worked for me. Now, where your mileage won't vary is with the latency. So as I mentioned before, Accsoon claims sub 25 millisecond latency, but it's with a big asterisk next to it that says it's only when shooting with a low bitrate. Now, if you're shooting at 24 FPS, as a lot of churches are, then 25 millisecond latency is going to end up being one single frame of delay. Now that could be noticeable depending on where your camera is positioned and what it's pointed at, etc., but it's definitely going to be workable. The glaring problem though is that we already know that we can't use a low bitrate because we already know it looks like absolute garbage when we do. So, okay, well, what's the latency like when shooting at a high bitrate? Well, in my testing, it's pretty much exactly the same as when you're shooting with a low bitrate. The problem though? It's nowhere near sub 25 milliseconds. Instead, I was seeing a very consistent 60 millisecond delay compared to my hardwired camera, regardless of the bitrate. I checked this by pointing the camera at a stopwatch and then freezing the video at different times to see what the timer was at on each signal. So you can see, no matter where we pause this timer, the Accsoon is pretty consistently 60 milliseconds behind the hardwired line. When shooting at 24 FPS, this is going to result in being 2 frames behind a wired camera, which starts to become a real problem when dealing with video and audio syncing up. I mean, our normal wired cameras are about 3 frames behind the audio in the room, and it's noticeable if we don't delay the audio, which we do. So that means that this 2-frame delay is definitely going to be noticeable in your live stream. Again, I'm sure if you put these cameras maybe in the right place, you could maybe get away with it, but if you're trying to use it to get close-ups of anything, and wireless cameras usually are, you're gonna notice and it's gonna be off. And look, I get it. Low latency is incredibly hard to achieve with high quality video. This is the killer of most of these cheap wireless systems. And a lot of use cases for these wireless systems don't really need near zero latency like live production does. So there's not that much impetus for these budget companies to actually improve it. But it's definitely a pretty big deal breaker for me. So that brings me to my recommendation. Do I think you should pick these up? Honestly, no. And that's not because these aren't great. I mean, they really are. I just don't think they're the best for live production, especially not at this price point. Instead, I think that price still goes to the Teradek Ace 500, the system that consistently wins again and again for me. Speaking of, I've got a whole video breaking down the Ace 500 and why it's such a game changer for churches. The link is up here. Now, I hate to keep mentioning this guy in reviews of other wireless systems, but the reality is that these products don't exist in a vacuum. If you're not going to compare one against the other, you're probably not being wise with your money because you don't know what else you could get. The Ace 500 has sub-millisecond latency, and I measured it side by side with the Accsoon to prove it. The video quality is just as good, if not better than these guys' high bitrate mode, and the connectivity is just as reliable, at least in our use case. Now, it doesn't have some of the other bells and whistles that this has, but it's got it where it counts for me. Look, the Accsoon CineView, it's a good unit and it works well, but for live production, it's hard for me to recommend when there's another option so close in price. The Teradek is $1,000, by the way. But hey, if you're doing something where 60 milliseconds of latency just really isn't an issue for you, and these other features stand out to you, like feel free to pick one of these guys up. They've worked great for me otherwise, and if you pick one up, make sure to use the link in the description to order it from Amazon, because I get a small commission from that. Thank you. But in the meantime, I'm gonna continue recommending the Teradek as the best budget wireless video system. I mean, unless someone else makes something that just really outperforms it. Accsoon, if you get that latency down, be sure to send it to me and I will gladly make the switch to that new system. Until next time.